The alley smelled like rotten iron. Logan had smelled worse, but something underneath the surface stink. Wet cobblestone, garbage brine, centuries of city, made the short hairs at the back of his neck stand up before he'd fully gotten to his feet. Not the smell itself. What was inside it? Old blood. A lot of it. Soaked into the stone over decades until the street itself had become a kind of record. He pushed himself upright from the cobblestones, one knee at a time, and took stock. Coat intact, shredded along the left shoulder where something had grabbed him hard. Hands fine, the adamantium was always fine. Head, a dull throb at the base of his skull, the specific ache of a hit that mattered before the healing kicked in. He touched the back of his skull and felt dried blood flake away from skin already closed. He didn't remember falling. That was normal enough, in a life measured not in years but in accumulated damage. Waking up disoriented with no memory of how you got there was less an emergency than a Tuesday. He stood fully and looked around. The street was Eastern European in its bones, narrow, centuries deep, buildings pressing inward as though trying to squeeze whatever walked between them, stone facades, iron railings, arched doorways, gutters running amber from the lamplight, the kind of city that hadn't been built so much as accumulated layer over layer, until whatever had been there first was buried so far down you'd need an archaeologist and a strong stomach to reach it. It was night. His first firm data point. His second was that the street was empty in the specific way streets get empty when something has scared people off. Not late-night quiet, not the natural emptiness of 3 a.m. Cleared out empty. Shuttered windows. No foot traffic. The distant sound of an engine, but no headlights moving. Logan rolled his shoulder until the joint cracked, then stepped to the alley's mouth and looked both ways. Nothing. He started walking. He didn't have a destination. No map, no money, no phone, no idea what country he was standing in. What he had was his nose, his instincts, and 6 blades of indestructible metal folded inside his forearms, which in his experience covered most situations. The dimensional pull, or whatever it had been, wasn't worth burning energy on. He'd been yanked through the wrong end of reality before. Usually it sorted itself out, or someone with better gear figured out the mechanics and punched a hole back. Until then, the practical problem was always the same. Find out where you are, find out what's dangerous, don't die in the meantime. The street curved downhill. He followed it. He heard them before he saw them. 3 sets of footsteps from the cross street ahead. Not running, not quite, but the aggressive, ground-eating stride of people covering distance without wanting attention. He could hear their breathing, slightly elevated. Could smell them, sweat, adrenaline, and something else. Something animal and wrong in a way that tugged at older instincts than the civilized ones. Logan stopped at the corner and waited. They came around it fast and nearly walked into him. 3 men, all big. Not gym-built, but the dense, structural kind of big that comes from genetics rather than effort. Dark clothing, hoods up. For half a second, all 3 froze with the particular stillness of people who'd been trying not to be seen and had just walked into a stranger. Logan looked at them. They looked at him. He smelled them again, and this time he put a name to the wrongness. Not human. Not exactly. Close enough that it wouldn't register to anyone not paying attention. But underneath the surface layer there was something else. A musk, a heat, a biology that didn't line up. His brain offered the word before he'd processed the data. Animal. One of them broke the freeze first. He looked at Logan the way predators look at things they're uncertain about, sizing up, calculating, defaulting to aggression while the math ran. Move. Accented English. His eyes stayed fixed on Logan's face with a steadiness that had nothing to do with human social dynamics. Sure, Logan said. And didn't. The man's nostrils flared. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite fear, but a cousin of it. A flicker that said wrong. That said this thing doesn't smell right. He glanced at the other 2. They'd had the same reaction. Logan could see it in the way they'd subtly recalibrated their stances. I said move. Quieter this time. More dangerous. And I said sure, Logan said. Didn't say when. 3 seconds of silence in which all 4 of them understood exactly where this was going. The first one lunged. He was fast. Logan gave him that. Faster than his size had any business being, moving with the fluid wrongness of something not operating on standard human muscle architecture. He crossed the distance in a fraction of a second and hit Logan with enough force to put a normal man through the wall behind him. Logan moved 3 inches left, caught the arm, and redirected. The man's own momentum did the rest, carrying him skull first into the stone with a crack that echoed off both buildings. The other two were already moving. The fight lasted 40 seconds. Close, ugly, no-room violence. The kind alleys were built for. One of them got a hand around Logan's throat and squeezed with strength that would have crushed a normal trachea. Logan let the grip complete, felt his airway compress, drove his elbow back into the man's ribs 3 times until something gave and the grip broke. He didn't pop the claws. He didn't know what he was dealing with yet, and killing things before you understood them was a good way to make enemies you couldn't identify. He put all 3 of them on the ground, winded, one with a clearly broken arm, and stepped back. The one with the broken arm looked up from the cobblestones. In the amber lamplight, his irises had shifted, gone pale, almost gold. Not a trick of the light. Logan looked at that for a moment. "What are you?" The man said nothing. His jaw was set against the pain, breath coming in controlled pulls, but his eyes stayed on Logan with a tension that had abandoned aggression entirely and moved into something more careful. "Who are you?" he said instead. "Nobody," Logan said, "and that's all you're getting." He turned and kept walking. Behind him, he heard one of them speak low and fast in a language he didn't fully recognize. Something close to Slavic but not quite any dialect he'd picked up over the decades. He caught one word that sounded like a title. Another, he was fairly sure meant wrong, or impossible, or something in the same neighborhood. He filed both away and walked. 2. He found the bar by accident, which was the best way to find bars. It was in a basement, a narrow staircase below street level. The entrance marked by nothing but a single light above the frame and the smell of beer and cigarette smoke leaking around the door. No sign, no name. The kind of place that counted on its clientele already knowing where it was. Logan had no money. He went in anyway. The interior was what you'd expect. Low ceiling, stone walls, half a dozen tables. A bar along the far end staffed by a heavy-set man with close-cropped gray hair and the expression of someone who had heard every possible story and retained interest in none of them. Dim lighting designed to make everyone look like they were in a 1970s crime film. Logan sat at the bar. The bartender looked at him with the recognition of someone who'd seen people come in with no intention of paying before. "You're not ordering." "I don't have money." Logan kept his voice level. "I'm not from here." "Then why are you here?" "Because I've been walking for 40 minutes and this is the first place with lights on." The bartender studied him. Then, with the resignation of a man who'd made peace with the worst of human nature a long time ago, he pulled a glass from under the bar and filled it from the tap without being asked. Logan drank. Dark, local beer. "Good enough." "What city is this?" he said. A pause. "Budapest, Central Europe." He'd been to Budapest before, the 1970s version, considerably less pleasant. The architecture tracked. "What year?" The bartender looked at him with an expression walking the line between pity and suspicion. "You're joking." "Do I look like I'm joking?" A long look. 2003. Logan absorbed that, close enough to his own timeline that whatever had pulled him hadn't thrown him far in time, only in the other axis, whichever one that was. He didn't have the vocabulary for the mechanics, and didn't want it. Practical information, Budapest, 2003. The men in the alley weren't human, and the city's stones, layer by layer, smelled of blood old enough to have become part of the architecture. He was halfway through his glass when the door opened and the temperature in the room changed. Not literally, but something shifted in the social atmosphere. A collective inward pull, the kind that happens when a specific type of person walks into a space. He tracked her in the mirror without turning. A woman. Tall, dark coat, moving with the particular ease of someone entirely comfortable in this room and entirely aware of what she looked like moving through it. Dark hair, early 30s, if you were generous. But there was something in the quality of her attention, the way her eyes moved across the space, that didn't track with the age of the face. She clocked Logan immediately. He caught it in the mirror. A half-second pause in her scan, a recalibration. Then she continued to the far end of the bar, 2 stools from him, and sat. She ordered in Hungarian. The bartender served her quickly and without comment, with the extra efficiency of someone serving a preferred customer. Logan didn't look at her directly. He also didn't stop being aware of her, which was a different thing. She smelled wrong, different wrong from the men in the alley. Nothing animal. Nothing like that. The wrongness went the other way, something reduced. Something absent from the biological profile that should have been there, like a word missing from a sentence you've read 100 times. She was drinking red wine. She caught his eye in the bar mirror. "You're not from here," she said. "Not a question. People keep telling me that." He set his glass down. "It's accurate." She turned slightly toward him without fully committing to the conversation, the practiced distance of someone maintaining plausible exit options. "You were in the streets tonight, near the Vonnegut district." A pause. "You encountered some of Lucian's men." Logan turned and looked at her directly for the first time. She met it without flinching. Most people, when Logan looked at them with the full weight of what he was, found somewhere else to be. The animal brain running its threat assessment and arriving at a specific recommendation. She didn't blink. "You've been watching me," he said. "We've been watching that area. You appeared in the middle of it." She took a slow sip of wine. "That was unexpected." "Yeah, for me too." Silence. Then, "They're alive." "I know. You chose not to kill them. I didn't know what they were yet. And now?" He picked up his glass and finished it, still working on it. She studied him with flat, measuring eyes. Up close the wrongness was more specific. The skin too controlled. The stillness too complete. A human face at rest has constant micro-movement, tiny adjustments, the low-grade animation of living tissue working to maintain itself. Her face was stiller than that. Not dead, operating on different parameters. "What you smell on me," she said, with no preamble and no indication of how she'd known he was doing it, "is what 600 years does to a person." The bar was quiet. The two men at the corner table had stopped talking. "Vampire," Logan said. She neither confirmed it nor denied it. "What are you?" "Somebody who's been alive a long time. Different mechanisms." He set his glass down. "Those men I fought, Lycans. Werewolves, if you prefer the less precise term. Our enemies. They've been our enemies for centuries." She paused. "You put 3 trained soldiers on the ground in under a minute without a weapon." "They were slow." "They were not slow." Something moved in her expression, not offense, but precision, the correction of someone who needed the data to be accurate. "Which is why I'm talking to you instead of leaving." Logan looked at her. She had the quality of someone who said exactly what they intended and nothing else. He respected that. It was one of his own habits. "What's your name?" he said. "Selene." A beat. "Logan." "You're not going to ask me the obvious question," she said. "Which one?" "Whether I'm going to try to kill you." "No," he said. "I'm going to let you tell me what you want instead, because you sat down here and started talking, which means you want something. When you're done, I'll decide whether you're going to try to kill me." Something moved across her face, not a smile, the structural predecessor of one. The expression of someone who had encountered a situation slightly different from what they'd prepared for. "We have a facility nearby," she said. "There are things happening in this city larger than a night of street fighting. I'd like to show you the scope of it." "Why?" "Because you clearly can't be killed easily, and because whatever you are, you're not part of this war." She picked up her wine. "That makes you the most genuinely neutral party I've encountered in approximately 400 years. Logan thought about the men in the alley. The gold-shifted eyes, the blood soaked into the city's bones. "One condition," he said. "Name it. Nobody touches me. Nobody runs tests. Nobody takes samples or tries to figure out what I am." His voice was flat and final. "I'm not a weapon and I'm not a resource. I look at what you want to show me. I make my own decisions about what I do with it." Selene held his gaze for 3 full seconds. In someone else, it would have been hesitation. In her, it felt like a calculation running to completion. "Agreed," she said. She stood, buttoned her coat, and moved toward the stairs. She didn't look back to see if he was following. He sat with his empty glass for exactly 4 seconds. Then he got up. 3. The facility wasn't what he'd expected. He'd expected something gothic, coffins, stone crypts, the visual language of something ancient performing its own menace. What he got was a converted mansion at the edge of the older district, massive, centuries old, but maintained with a precision that suggested serious money and serious intention. From the street, it looked like the private residence of someone wealthy and reclusive. He clocked 4 cameras before they reached the front door. At least 2 positions where a shooter could cover the approach without being seen. Selene moved through the entrance without breaking stride. The door opened before she reached it. The man holding it was tall, pale, dressed in dark clothing. The same quality of stillness she carried, that same biological absence. He looked at Logan with undisguised assessment. Logan looked back. "He's with me," Selene said, already past. The man stepped aside. Inside, the mansion had resolved into something between a military operations center and an old money estate that hadn't committed to either identity. Marble floors, dark wood paneling, light fixtures that had been electric for decades. But the furniture had been pushed aside in places to make room for monitors, communications gear, wall-mounted maps with markings in several colors. People moved through the space with the purposeful quiet of an organization running on operational tempo. All of them had that quality. All of them smelled wrong in the same direction Selene did. Logan walked through it and kept his breathing even and his hands loose. 14 in the main hall and foyer alone, more on the floor above. The accumulated wrongness of that many of them in one space pressed on the oldest parts of his brain, the parts that predated language, and said wrong, wrong, wrong at a frequency that was easy to ignore intellectually and hard to ignore physically. He ignored it. The library at the end of the corridor had been a reading room once. Now 3 walls held floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, real books, old ones, and the 4th had been given over entirely to maps, photographs, and documents connected by a web of string and notation he recognized as the visual architecture of a long-running intelligence operation. A table in the center held laptops in the remnants of a planning session. Standing at the table, a man Logan hadn't seen yet. Older-looking, broader, silver-streaked hair, a face that had been lived in hard. He carried himself differently from the others, less contained stillness, more the settled weight of command. He looked up when they entered, and his eyes went directly to Logan with a focus that stripped away any pretense of casual assessment. "Victor's Coven," Selene said without inflection, "what remains of its operational arm." "And Victor, sleeping," in a tone that did not invite further questions on the subject. The man came around the table. He was as tall as Logan, brought forward, extended a hand. "Khan, head of security." Logan shook it. Khan's grip was controlled. The grip of someone who knew exactly how much force they were applying and had chosen to apply a normal amount. That said something about how much force was available to them. "Selene says you dealt with 3 of Lucian's scouts near the Vonnegut," Khan said. "They got in my way. They were not amateurs." Khan moved to the map on the wall. "Lucian has been pushing his perimeter further into the upper city for 3 weeks, each incursion slightly deeper than the last." His finger moved along a yellow boundary line threaded with small notation marks, incident markers. "He's measuring." Logan moved closer. The map was detailed, Budapest, street level, 2 colors of markers. Red clustered in the lower city and the industrial districts near the river, blue in the upper city around the mansion. The yellow boundary between them was dense with incident notations going back years. Decades. "How long has this war been running?" Logan said. "Centuries," Khan said. "In its current form in the city, 60 years. Before that, centuries more elsewhere." "Who started it?" A silence in the room. Brief but present. "That," Selene said from behind him, "is a question with a complicated answer." "Most questions worth asking do," Logan said. "Doesn't mean you don't answer them." Khan looked at Selene. Something passed between them, not deference exactly, but the recognition of whose territory this was. "The origins involve betrayals on both sides," Selene said. "What matters in the present is what Lucian is building." She moved to the table and pulled a folder from beneath one of the laptops, slid it toward Logan. "Open it." Inside, surveillance photographs, not great quality, but clear enough. Men loading equipment into vehicles, mostly at night. Weapons crates, communications gear, standard enough. But in several photographs, sealed cases with handling marks that indicated temperature sensitivity or biological containment. "He's been acquiring biological compounds," Selene said. "We believe he's attempting to stabilize a hybrid serum, something that would combine Lycan and vampire genetic material in a single organism." She let that settle. An organism carrying the regenerative and physical capabilities of both species without either's primary weakness. "Lycans are vulnerable to silver," Logan said. "You're vulnerable to UV. A true hybrid would carry neither vulnerability, both physiological advantages." She paused. "You understand the implications." Logan looked at the photographs, at the containment cases. "How close is he?" "We don't know." The honesty in it was flat, unadorned. Close enough that we're concerned. And what does any of this have to do with me? Selene closed the folder. You are, based on what I observed tonight, exceptionally difficult to injure and remarkably effective in close combat. You have no affiliation in this city and no stake in which side wins. She met his eyes directly. We would like to hire you. No, you haven't heard the terms. Doesn't matter. He pushed the folder back across the table. I don't work for hire, especially not for people I met an hour ago in a bar. I'll look at what you're dealing with. If I decide it's worth acting on, I'll act, but I won't take orders and I won't be a weapon you aim somewhere. Khan's jaw tightened. Logan could read him clearly, the type who thought in terms of assets and assignments, who found anything outside those categories mildly threatening, the type who'd been running operations long enough to mistake the map for the territory. That's an unusual position, Khan said, for someone with no resources and no contacts in an unfamiliar city. Yeah, well. Logan shrugged. I've been in worse spots. A silence. Longer this time. There's a room on the 3rd floor, Selene said. No obligation. You're free to leave at any time. She picked up the folder. In the morning, if you stay, I'll show you the rest. Logan looked at her. Looked at Khan, who was very carefully not showing what he thought about that arrangement. He thought about the street outside. Budapest, 2003. A city he didn't belong in a reality that wasn't quite his. A war running in the dark between things that weren't human. Biological containment cases moving through the back channels of that war towards some destination nobody on this side of it had identified. 3rd floor, he said. Nobody comes in unless I open the door. Selene nodded once. IV. He was up before dawn. Logan moved through the building slowly, taking its measure now that most of its inhabitants were in whatever state vampires spent their non-operational hours. Not coffins, not sleep exactly. A kind of low-activity stillness distributed across the upper floors. He passed 2 of them in the corridor. Both acknowledged him without alarm, a nod, a look, the minimal social transaction of people who knew he was there and had decided he was supposed to be. Good security culture. He noted it. He found the kitchen on the ground floor, helped himself to coffee from the most modern piece of equipment in the building, and stood at the rear window watching the garden go from black to gray. Selene found him there at 6. Dressed differently now, still dark, but practical, the clothing of someone intending to move. She poured herself nothing. He filed that. You went through the building, she said. I did. Find anything concerning? No. She came to stand at the other end of the counter and looked out at the garden. In the early morning light, the wrongness of her was more apparent. The skin too consistent, the stillness too complete. But in this light, something else was visible too. A weight. The quality of someone who had been doing the same difficult thing for a very long time and had arrived at a point beyond conviction or doubt, simply the ongoing commitment of someone who didn't know how to stop. He recognized that. I want to show you something, she said. The lower districts. The boundary area near Lucian's territory. She looked at him. Just the 2 of us. Why? A team draws attention. I'm trying to show you things without starting an incident. A pause. And because I believe you can handle yourself. And if Lucian's people see you, they'll report it. They won't engage. Not in daylight. Not against whatever number they can respond with in the time available. She turned from the window. They prefer advantaged situations. Logan drank the last of his coffee. Give me 10 minutes. They went out into the early morning. Budapest before rush hour was a different city. Quieter but not empty. Delivery vehicles, early commuters, the city's maintenance infrastructure running through its routines. Logan and Selene moved through it without urgency. 2 people walking. Nothing remarkable, from a distance. After a few blocks he said, the film version. She looked at him. Sunlight, he said. I'd heard it was a problem. A myth, propagated in part by our own elders, strategically useful to keep your enemies uncertain about your vulnerabilities. She kept her eyes on the street ahead. Strong ultraviolet radiation at sufficient intensity is a genuine concern. Direct midsummer sun, extended exposure. A winter morning in Budapest is not. What actually kills you? Decapitation. Significant trauma to the cardiac region. A beat. Otherwise we are difficult to stop. Difficult, Logan said. Not impossible. Nothing is impossible to stop. That's a lesson the old ones forget. They live long enough to start believing the myths about themselves. She paused. Victor believes certain things about his own permanence that are going to become problems. He's your elder. He's my maker. The flatness of it carried 4 centuries of complicated history and offered exactly none of it for examination. That's a different thing. They walked in silence for a block. You said the war started with betrayals on both sides, Logan said. What kind? A longer pause. They were moving downhill toward the river, the architecture shifting from grand residential to denser industrial. The original relationship between our kinds was not one of equals, she said finally. Lycans were enslaved. They served as daytime guardians. They could move in sunlight we could not, protected our facilities, our sleeping members, our interests during the hours we couldn't defend ourselves. She kept her gaze forward. The Corvinus bloodline is the origin of both species, a single family, 2 brothers, 2 different inheritances. One became the first vampire, one became the first Lycan. She didn't continue immediately, and a human woman in the middle of it, Logan said, who didn't survive either outcome. A small silence. Lucian was the first of his kind born in captivity rather than turned in the field. Victor kept him as a personal guardian. Lucian fell in love with Victor's daughter. Another pause. Victor had her killed. He considered it a contamination. Logan walked with that for a moment, and that's when Lucian started the war. Before that, it was occasional violence. After Sonia's death, she said the name without weight, which somehow made it heavier. It became organized, intentional. He has been building towards something specific ever since. The hybrid serum. Yes, and Victor, your maker, had his own daughter killed because she was involved with the Lycan. Logan let the beat land, and you continued to serve him. The silence that followed was full. When she answered, the words had the quality of something worked over many times and always arriving at the same incomplete place. I serve the Coven, she said, which is not the same as serving Victor personally. The Coven is 600 years of survival, structure, accumulated knowledge. It exists independently of any one person's decisions. A pause. Even decisions I find indefensible. Logan didn't push it. He understood the distinction she was drawing. He'd spent enough time attached to organizations whose decisions he found indefensible to know that the line between the institution and the individual was real, and that it didn't make your position simpler. They'd reached the boundary area. He could tell before she said anything. The smell shifted, that animal quality rising in the background, subtle and layered, like a tide coming in. Multiple individuals, multiple timestamps, all carrying that same fundamental wrongness from the alley. 3 blocks ahead, Selene said quietly, is where their operational presence becomes consistent. She turned to look at a warehouse on their right, 4 stories, industrial windows on the upper floors blacked out, ground floor entrance via a loading dock whose hinges were recently oiled. Watch this building. Logan looked at it, people inside. 6 to 10, he estimated. Staging point, Selene said. They move materials and personnel between the lower district and the boundary area. The containment cases, some have passed through here. You've considered taking it. Every time we run the analysis, the conclusion is the same. They relocate and we lose the intelligence value of knowing where they are. She started walking again, slowly. So we watch. And they know you watch. A short pause, probably. So they're managing what you see. The pause this time had the quality of someone acknowledging something they'd been avoiding. It's possible. Which is part of why I wanted you to see it directly, rather than through our own filtered intelligence. Logan looked at the building one last time and kept walking. He noted the side entrance, the ventilation on the roof, the cable run along the upper floor that suggested internal communications infrastructure. What do you actually know about the serum's current state? He said. We know he's been acquiring biological material from multiple sources. We know he has at least one scientific asset with the expertise to work on hybridization. We know he's been testing. She walked in silence for a moment. We don't know the results of those tests. We had a source inside his operation 6 months ago. That source is no longer available. Dead. Yes. How? Lucian found them. A flat, final quality to it that closed the door. Logan thought about that. About the systematic intelligence of someone running the same insurgency for centuries. About someone who knew exactly what internal compromise looked like because he'd built his entire war on identifying and exploiting it. He's smarter than you want him to be, Logan said. Selene looked at him. Your people talk about him like a problem to be managed, but everything you've told me describes someone who's been outmaneuvering you for decades." He kept his voice level, assessment, not judgment. The incursions getting closer, the source being burned, the hybrid project moving forward while you watch a warehouse you know he knows you're watching. He paused. "He's not measuring your perimeter. He already passed it. He's measuring something else." Selene walked in silence for half a block. "What?" she said. "That's the question," Logan said. "What is he actually trying to find out?" She had no answer for that. He could tell from the quality of her silence, not evasion, genuine uncertainty. Which meant it was a question worth asking, which meant something about the intelligence picture was wrong in a way that nobody inside it had fully identified yet. He kept walking and kept thinking. He went alone and on foot, which was the only way to do it properly. The southern district began where the tourist-facing city gave way to the version that did the actual work. Warehouses converted to mixed uses, light industrial buildings alongside residential blocks built for a previous economic era and never repurposed. Wider streets, counterintuitively, built for vehicle access to loading docks, not foot traffic. They had the broad, slightly desolate quality of streets designed to move things rather than people. Logan moved through it slowly, taking an indirect route, doubling back twice. He'd been doing this long enough to know that the first thing you established in new territory was whether you were alone, and you established it by not going where you were going. He wasn't being followed. He started moving with purpose. The Lycan scent was present throughout the district, dispersed and residual. The electory record of frequent traffic over a long period, not a new operational area. People had been moving through here for months, minimum. He worked the grid systematically without making it predictable, looking for the point where the scent residue moved from dispersed to concentrated. He found it 40 minutes in, a building on a side street 2 blocks from the river, former industrial, 4 stories. The exterior was unremarkable to the point of intentionality, the kind of unremarkable that took effort. The windows intact but treated, a faint darkening of the glass that blocked line of sight from outside without making the building obviously different from its neighbors. The entrance a standard commercial door with no visible lock hardware, which meant the hardware was internal, which meant the door was meant to look unimportant. Logan stood in the shadow of a recessed doorway across the street and cataloged. People inside, multiple, at least 6, probably more. The smell was concentrated here, layered and deep. This wasn't a transit point, this was habitation, work. And underneath the habitation, something else, chemical, antiseptic, the specific edge of biological laboratory work, disinfectants, reagents, the sharp undertone of equipment running continuously in a climate-controlled environment. Faint, because the building's environmental management was good. But his nose was better than the seal's. He stayed in the doorway for 20 minutes, watching street traffic, counting and timing. 1 vehicle passing without stopping. 1 pedestrian exiting a building 2 doors down without looking back. No visible external security on the target, which meant the security was internal, or positioned in ways he hadn't identified, or both. 3 things he noted before pulling back. First, the ventilation outlet on the south face running continuously, putting a faint warmth into the air when the wind shifted. You ran that infrastructure for biological materials. You didn't run it for a storage facility. Second, a cable conduit on the east face, post-construction addition, connecting to an antenna cluster on the roof that was partially concealed by a false parapet. Communications infrastructure beyond what a simple staging post required. Third, and most important, the organic smell underneath the antiseptic. If he pushed his perception into it as far as it would go, there was something else. Biology operating outside its normal parameters. A complicated smell. Layered and strange. The smell of cellular processes being pushed in directions they hadn't evolved to go. He'd smelled something like it once before, a long time ago, in a facility in Canada. In a place where people in white coats had done things to him with equipment that was at the time the most sophisticated in the world. The Weapon X program had its own smell. This wasn't identical, but it was in the same category. Something alive was in that building, something alive in a complicated way. He was 3 blocks from the facility when he heard it. From an alley to his right, the sound of a body hitting a wall, followed by the specific breathing that came from serious pain. He stopped, turned. 2 individuals in the alley, both Lycan and a third that was making the pain sounds. The third smelled different. Vampire. The same familiar wrongness in the opposite direction. Logan stood at the alley mouth for 1 second. Then he went in. The scene resolved as his eyes adjusted, Two large men with a third person pinned against the far wall. A young woman, dark clothing, feet several inches off the ground, her collar in one man's fist. The other stood back at a slight angle. The position of someone providing control, not doing the primary work. None of them had heard him. "Put her down," Logan said. All three looked at him. The two men ran their assessment, sizing up, calculating, defaulting to aggression. "Walk away," the man holding her said. "I was walking," Logan said. "Then I heard this. This isn't your concern. You're right." He kept his voice flat. "Put her down anyway." The man looked at his colleague. A decision was made. The second one came off the wall with that same unnatural speed, crossing the alley in a fraction of a second. Logan sidestepped, caught the arm, and let one claw come out. A single blade from his right hand, catching the man's sleeve and the wall behind him simultaneously, pinning neither but making the geometry of the situation unmistakable. The man stopped moving. Looked at the claw. Looked at Logan's face. "I won't say it again," Logan said. The man holding the woman released her. She dropped and landed cleanly. "There are 4 more of us within 2 blocks, the first man said. "Information, not threat." The more sophisticated version of the same move. "I've got enemies in every district I've ever been in," Logan said. "Hasn't killed me yet." He retracted the claw. They left. Fast and silent into the street. Logan turned to the woman. She was straightening her coat with precise, composed movements, doing work over what had just happened. Dark hair, pale, the same quality of stillness as the others. She looked at him with an expression, making very careful decisions about how much to show. "Thank you," she said. Accented English, Eastern European, but different from Selene's. A different region or a different century of acquisition. "You're with the Coven," he said. She smelled like the mansion. "You're the one Selene brought in. Word travels fast. We're a small organization. A stranger arriving is significant." She glanced at the alley mouth. "They've been more aggressive in this area recently. I wasn't supposed to be this far south." "Nobody was," Logan said. "That's apparently been the idea." She looked at him without fully understanding. He didn't explain. "Can you get back safely?" "Yes." A pause. "I was observing a building 2 blocks east. I thought I had a clean approach. They were already in position when I arrived." Another pause, shorter. "I think it's the building you were just near." Logan looked at her for a moment. "Selene sent 2 of us, separately. I didn't know you were out here. Neither of us knew about each other." He let that land, which means Lucian's people, if they were watching, just saw 2 separate approaches to the same building inside the same hour. Her expression changed, the same reorganization he'd seen in Selene's face earlier, the model shifting under the weight of new data. "They'll know we found it," she said. "They'll move it," Logan said. "How long do we have?" She already had her phone out. 7. Her name was Erica. She'd been with the Coven for 40 years, which she mentioned with the same matter-of-fact quality Selene used for her centuries. She was on the phone with Khan as they walked, speaking rapidly in Hungarian, switching to English, when technical precision required it. "He wants to know what you saw," Erica said, holding the phone slightly away from her ear. "Tell him I smelled a biological laboratory in active operation. Not storage, operation. And at least 1 living subject, something being kept in controlled conditions." He paused. "Tell him it needs to be approached carefully. Not an assault. If they're already moving it, a full assault just accelerates the move and destroys the evidence." Erica relayed this. A pause on the other end. "He asks how you know about biological laboratories." "Tell him I've been inside one as the subject," Logan said. "Tell him that's all he gets." Another pause. Shorter than Logan expected. "He says understood," Erica said. The briefing in the library was fast and without ceremony. Selene had the detail map of the southern district out before they'd finished crossing the entry hall. Logan put his finger on the building's location. Khan made a mark. Erica filled in the patrol positions, approach angles, timing of the Lycan response. Selene listened to all of it without interrupting. Then she looked at Logan. "You said a living subject. Something in controlled conditions with sustained biological activity, the kind that requires continuous climate management." A pause. "Not materials, not samples, something running its own processes." "A test subject," Khan said. His voice had a flatness to it. Not indifference. The opposite. The register of someone pressing a strong reaction down to a manageable level. That's what it smelled like. Selene looked at the detail map. "If they're moving it, The subject goes with everything else. You don't abandon viable test results. She traced the river road with one finger. They have vehicle access from the south face. Service road along the river. If they're extracting, that's the route. Unless they go north through the boundary area, Khan said. They won't. Not with biological materials and a live subject in transit. Moving north means contested ground. Moving south means open routes. She looked up. I want 2 vehicles on the river road. Positioned before we breach, not after. If extraction is already in progress when we arrive, we need to be ahead of it. Khan nodded and went to make the calls. Selene looked at Logan. You'll come. Not a question. What's the team? Myself, you, 3 others. Small enough to move without the approach being obvious. Large enough to handle what's inside. A pause. Khan stays here to coordinate the vehicle positions. From across the room, Khan clearly heard this and clearly had opinions he decided not to voice. Logan gave him credit for that. It took a specific kind of discipline. Timeline? We move in 40 minutes. That puts us at the building before first light. After first light, civilian foot traffic increases and the window closes. Entry plan, rear access on the north face. Loading dock, disused but structurally sound. We go in there, move to the laboratory level, assess what's there. She looked at him steadily. If the subject is still in place, we secure and extract. If the laboratory is being moved, we document what we can and withdraw. If Lucian's people are there in force. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. One condition, Logan said. You mentioned that approach last night. Same approach. If I assess a situation differently than you do in the field, I reserve the right to act on my own assessment. Selene looked at him. Define differently. If I think withdrawal is the wrong call, I'll say so. If you overrule me, I'll withdraw. But if I think something in there needs to be stopped, he let a beat pass. I'll tell you what I'm doing before I do it. I won't ask permission. Khan, from across the room, had stopped pretending to make calls. Selene held Logan's gaze for 3 full seconds. Agreed, she said, on the condition that you understand what you're agreeing to in return. Your independent judgment in the field is yours to exercise and yours to bear the consequences of. If you take an action that triggers a response we weren't prepared for, you don't get to point at the plan as justification. She paused. You act on your judgment. You own the outcome. Logan looked at her. It was a fair deal. More than fair, the kind of deal that required genuine confidence to offer, because it meant accepting the same standard of accountability you were applying to someone else. Agreed, he said. E8. The team assembled in the rear courtyard 40 minutes later. 3 others, Rays, the largest of them, with a face that looked like it had introduced itself to harder objects for centuries and always come out modified but intact. Soren, leaner, with the particular economy of movement that said speed was his primary language. And a woman called Petra, whose eyes had the specific depth of someone who'd catalogued a very great many things and remembered all of them. Selene briefed them in 3 minutes. Building position, entry point, objectives, withdrawal triggers. The compressed efficiency of someone who'd been running operations longer than most military institutions had existed. No excess. No motivation. Just information, sequence, contingencies. Logan listened and said nothing until Soren looked at him with the direct attention of someone asking a question without words. I go where the smell goes, Logan said. If something in there needs following, I follow it. Soren nodded once. They went on foot, spread enough not to read as a group, close enough to converge in seconds. The city held its brief stillness, that narrow window between the end of the night population and the beginning of the morning. When the streets held almost nobody and even the light felt provisional, Logan moved slightly ahead at Selene's direction, using his nose to read the route. The path to the building was clean. No counter-surveillance. Whoever had been in that alley with Erica had either moved to respond or withdrawn to report. Either way, they weren't on this route. The building appeared ahead, same dark exterior, ventilation still running on the south face. He could hear it from 30 meters. He could also hear something else, movement inside. More bodies than before, and more urgency. The acoustic signature of people moving equipment with purpose. Drawers and doors. Things being packaged and carried. He could hear it through the walls. He stalked. Held up a hand. The group stopped with him. They're moving. Already started. He pushed his hearing forward. 8, maybe 10 inside. Activity concentrated on the second floor. He pushed his nose into it. The organic smell, The complicated stress biology quality of something alive under pressure was still there. Subject is still in place. "Then we go now," Selene said. Before they move it, Reyes dealt with the loading dock door in 4 seconds, using a method Logan didn't fully observe but which left the door functional, the correct outcome if you wanted to control the exit as well as the entrance. Ground floor, storage, shelving units, crates. The residue of things that had been here for years, nothing sophisticated. The stairs were at the back. Logan went first. The second floor changed everything. From dead air to a precisely managed environment, cooler, filtered, the slightly artificial quality of conditioned air. The antiseptic smell was concentrated and layered with chemical complexity. The corridor ran the length of the building, light under 3 doors. From behind the furthest one, the sounds of packing had taken on the intensity of people working against a deadline they could feel but couldn't quantify. Logan stopped at the nearest lit door, pushed it open slowly. A laboratory, or what had been one 20 minutes ago. Equipment being stripped, benches cleared, instruments packed into padded cases. 2 people working with their backs to the door, efficient and focused. They hadn't heard him come in. He moved to the nearest bench. Notebooks, paper, overlooked in the equipment prioritization. He opened the first one, dense handwriting, the language a mix of what looked like Latin and something else, interspersed with numerical notation and diagrams. The same visual vocabulary as the centuries-old schematics Selene had shown him in the library, but updated, rendered in the shorthand of contemporary scientific practice. He couldn't read the language. The diagrams were clear enough: molecular structures, process diagrams, sequence maps. The hybrid work in its current form, documented by hand in the same tradition that had started 300 years ago. One of them turned around. For half a second, both people in the room looked at each other. Then the nearer one reached for something on the bench, not a weapon. A radio. Logan crossed the room in 2 steps and took the radio before the call connected. Set it on the bench. He looked at the man, young-looking, pale. The Lycan quality beneath the surface, but attenuated. Scientific rather than operational. He was looking at Logan with the rapid assessment of someone recalibrating very quickly. "The notebooks," Logan said. "How many are there?" "Nothing. I'm not going to hurt you." "How many notebooks?" Still nothing. But the man's eyes moved, briefly, involuntarily, to the door at the far end of the room. Logan took the 4 notebooks from the bench and moved to that door. A preparation area, equipment half-packed. A single person who stopped moving when Logan entered. This one looked at him with something raw and undisguised. Fear present in the face without management, without suppression, just there. Across this room, another door, and from behind it, the organic smell. Close, detailed and specific, something alive. Something complicated, something that had been in this building for a long time. Logan set the notebooks down and opened the door. The room was small and climate-controlled to a precise temperature. It had the character of a medical room rather than a cell. Not bars, not chains, but the specific infrastructure of biological management. A clinical bed, monitoring equipment, some of it still running on battery backup. IV apparatus, disconnected. The bed rigged with carrying handles, prepared for transport. On the bed, sitting up, was a man. Dark-haired, lean, with the particular pallor of someone who hadn't seen natural light in a long time. He was looking at Logan with an expression that had gone very still, not the stillness of Selene's kind, the stillness of someone who had learned to make themselves unreadable because being readable had cost them things. His smell was the most complex thing Logan had encountered since arriving in this city. Both qualities were present. The animal heat of the Lycan, the measured absence of the vampire, not one layered over the other, not one dominant and one residual, both simultaneously integrated at a level that wasn't combination, something more fundamental. Something that had started as 2 separate biological languages and become a third one, hybrid, not theoretical, not in progress, done. Logan stood in the doorway and understood several things at once. Lucian hadn't been close to completing his project. He'd completed it, or at least completed a version of it. The product of 3 centuries of work was sitting on a clinical bed in a building that was being evacuated around him, and the man on the bed knew exactly what he was. He'd been living with that knowledge in this room under these conditions for long enough that it had settled into the particular resignation that comes from having had hope and having had it managed very carefully out of you. He was looking at Logan's hands, at the knuckles where the adamantium sometimes showed itself if you knew what you were looking at, a faint, raised quality, the ghost of the bone structure beneath. Then he looked up at Logan's face. The expression in his eyes shifted from managed resignation to something else. Something Logan hadn't seen directed at him in a very long time. Recognition. Michael, the man said, unprompted, before Logan had said anything at all, just the name offered into the silence as if establishing that he had one was the most important thing he could do in the first 10 seconds of this encounter. Logan understood the impulse. Logan, he said. Michael looked at him with that careful stillness. You're not one of them. He meant the Coven. No. Lycan? No. Then what are you? Something else. Logan held the gaze. Which is all you're getting right now. Behind him, Selene had come up to the preparation room door. He could hear her assessing the scene without entering. He could hear, from the rest of the second floor, the sounds of packing stop. The people doing it had realized something had changed. He turned slightly. Selene was in the doorway reading the room with eyes that moved from Michael to the monitoring equipment to the transport rigging on the bed. Whatever she was feeling, she was keeping most of it interior, but around the edges, she couldn't fully control it. He's real, she said quietly. Yeah, Logan said. Michael had tracked the exchange without comment. He was assessing Selene now with that same careful, cross-referencing attention. You're a death dealer. Yes. Then you're here to kill me. No. A pause. We're here to understand what Lucian has built. Something complicated moved through Michael's expression. You're looking at it, he said. I'm what he's built. 3 years in this room and this is what he's got. He glanced at the IV apparatus, the monitoring equipment, the clinical architecture of his existence. I don't think built is the right word, but it's the one everyone uses. Can you move? Logan said. Yes. Are you injured? Not currently. Then we need to leave in the next 2 minutes. The people packing this floor are going to respond to us being here shortly, and this building needs to be empty before they do. Michael looked at Logan with an expression doing a great deal of work, measuring, weighing options he clearly didn't have in abundance. Logan recognized the quality of that calculation. It was the calculation of someone who'd been under someone else's control long enough that when genuine choice appeared, they needed a moment to verify it was real. Why would I go with you? Michael said. Not hostile. Honest. The real question underneath it, how is this different from what I already have? Logan thought about the diplomatic version of an answer. The strategic version framing Michael's value to the Coven in terms that made extraction sound like mutual benefit. Selene would probably have used that version. It would have been effective. He didn't use it. Because staying means going back into a case and being moved to another room in another building, he said. Because whatever they're planning to do with what they've built, it's not going to get better for you when it's finished. He paused. And because I know what it's like to be the thing someone spent a long time making. I know what the exit from that looks like. This is it. The room was quiet. Michael got off the bed. They moved fast. Logan at the lead, Michael directly behind him, Selene covering the rear. In the preparation room, the scientist was gone, slipped out while Logan was with Michael. Correct call from a survival standpoint. The notebooks were still on the surface where he'd left them. He took them. The corridor, Ray's at the stairhead. Petra at the far end near the south face. Both of them registered Michael immediately with the focused attention of professionals encountering an unknown element in an active operation. Petra's hand moved toward the weapon at her hip. With us, Selene said. Quiet. Total authority. Petra's hand dropped. Ray's said nothing. His eyes moved from Michael to Logan and back to Michael. Then he turned to the stairs. Ground floor. The loading dock had become a problem. 3 of Lucian's people had arrived at the dock entrance and encountered Soren. What had followed was a standoff. Soren in the doorway, 3 large men in the tight space of the dock, everyone suspended in the specific frozen geometry of a confrontation that hadn't yet committed to its direction. Logan came down the stairs and the geometry changed. The 3 men saw Michael behind Logan and Selene, and something shifted in their faces. Not the aggression calculation from before. Something different, more complicated. The recognition of a situation that had moved entirely outside its expected parameters. Step aside, Logan said. The one in the center, older than the other 2, with the authority face of someone who'd given orders for a very long time, looked at Logan. Looked at Michael. Looked at Selene. He stays, the man said. He doesn't. He's not yours to take. He's not yours to keep, Logan said. That's the end of this conversation. The man's eyes moved to Michael, not to Logan. to Michael directly. "You know what she is," he said. "You know what they'll do with you." Michael said nothing, but he didn't move backward. Logan let his hands hang loose at his sides. The posture of someone who has already decided. Last time, the calculation ran. Logan could see it running, 3 against 6 in a tight space, with an unknown element at the center of the opposing group that had put 3 trained soldiers on the ground the previous night without deploying whatever lived in his hands. The calculation arrived at its result. They stepped aside. Logan moved through the dock and into the street without rushing. The group moved with him. Half a block, 2. Behind them, through the building's walls, the sounds of packing resumed. "They let us go," Petra said quietly. "They let Michael go," Selene corrected, equally quiet. "They're calculating what that means. They'll report to Lucian before they act." "Lucian won't be happy," Ray said. "No," Selene agreed. "He won't." They walked. Michael moved with the slightly uncertain quality of someone who hadn't been on a street in a very long time. Taking in the unmanaged space, the open air, the sensory input of a city not engineered to contain him, he kept pace. Didn't speak. Logan walked beside him and said nothing either. Sometimes the right thing to offer someone who'd been in a room for 3 years was simply the absence of demands. The river was visible to the south, the sky above it beginning its slow pre-dawn lightening. The city held its brief silence. That few minutes before the morning becomes undeniable. They walked toward the upper district and didn't look back. Lucian was awake when the report came in. He was usually awake. Sleep, for someone who had lived as long as he had, was no longer the reliable mechanism it had been in the first centuries. It came and went on its own schedule, indifferent to darkness or quiet or the absence of things to do. He'd stopped fighting the pattern a long time ago and simply worked through the hours it left him, which were many. The room he used as an office was in the lower district, 3 buildings from the river, not the facility that had been compromised. That one had been, in the end, a sacrifice he'd been prepared to make. The first rule of running an insurgency against a more powerful enemy was never to put everything in one place. He was reading when Trix came in. His second. A woman who'd been with him for decades, who had the operational instincts of someone built for this kind of work and the loyalty of someone whose reasons for being here were deeply personal. She moved with the directness of someone carrying important information and knowing better than to frame it carefully. "They took him," she said. Lucian put the book down. "Selene and a team, plus the unknown from the street reports." She paused. Michael left with them. Lucian was quiet for a moment. He was not a man who displayed reaction easily. Over centuries of captivity and war and losses that would have broken something less structurally sound, he had developed a management of his interior state so thorough it had become architectural. He felt things with the full intensity that centuries of accumulated experience produced in a person who had never stopped feeling. He showed what he chose to show. The 2 systems operated independently of each other. He showed nothing now. The notebooks? 4 bench notebooks. Primary sequence documentation. Trix kept her voice even. "The equipment is intact. The facility is clean. The notebooks are replaceable," Lucian said. He tapped his temple. "The work is here." Not arrogantly, as simple fact. 3 centuries of a single problem, and the most important parts had never been written down in the first place. The notebooks were laboratory records, useful for continuity, not for comprehension. What was not replaceable was the subject. He stood and moved to the window. Outside, the lower district was beginning its morning, the human population above it proceeding through its routines, entirely unaware of the wars beneath. He'd spent 6 centuries watching that surface life proceed without knowledge of what held it up or what threatened it from below. He thought about Michael. Michael was not simply a result. He was not, in Lucian's understanding of the project, a weapon or a tool. Though Lucian was aware that the people around him used those words and had never corrected them, because the correction would have required an explanation he wasn't prepared to offer. What Michael represented was something more precise, the proof of a thesis, the biological demonstration that what had been divided could be made whole, that the original split, the divergence of 2 inheritances from a single bloodline, was not inevitable, not permanent, not written into the nature of things. Victor had believed it was permanent, had enforced that belief with centuries of slavery, and ultimately with the death of the one person who had briefly made the division irrelevant. Michael's existence said Victor was wrong. That was the real project. Always had been. Lucian turned from the window. "Where will they take him?" The Coven mansion, most defensible position they have in the city. Victor's house, Lucian said. He moved back to his desk and sat. And Victor is sleeping. Victor is sleeping, Trix agreed, which means Selene is making decisions. He was quiet for a moment thinking. She's smarter than Victor in several ways that matter. More pragmatic. Less committed to the ideology. A pause. She'll want to understand what Michael is before she decides what to do with him. She has the notebooks, they'll give her the record. They won't give her the interpretation. He looked at the window. She'll want to talk to him. And Michael will talk to her. He said it without bitterness, which was the difficult version. He has no reason not to. She didn't put him in that room. Trix was quiet. Then, what do you want to do? Lucian thought about it the way he always thought about options. Not as a list to evaluate, but as a field to read. Each option had a shape, a set of implications that extended forward in time and touched other things. The skill wasn't optimization. It was comprehension. The unknown, he said. The one from the street reports. We still don't know who he is. Both sets of men described the same thing. Exceptional physical capability, something in his hands that reads as a weapon but isn't conventional. He smells wrong to them, not human, not anything they recognize. Trix waited. He's working adjacent to the Coven. But if you were aligned with them, they'd have sent him with a team. He was alone in the Southern District. He acted independently, and Selene's operation absorbed the result. He turned the problem over. He's an unknown variable that both sides are trying to assess. Which means he could be an asset, Trix said. Which means he could be a variable. Lucian picked up his book. Which is more interesting? He opened it. I want to know what he is, not from the men who encountered him. From someone with better tools. A pause. But not tonight. Let the situation settle. Let Selene run her assessment of Michael. Let the unknown man get comfortable. Trix nodded and moved to leave. Comfortable people, Lucian said, without looking up from the page, make choices that tell you things. She left. Lucian sat with the book open and didn't read it. He thought about Michael in the Coven mansion, in the hands of people whose entire ideology held that Michael shouldn't exist. He thought about what Michael had survived to get here, about what that survival had cost him, about the 3 years in that room, and what 3 years did to a person's relationship with hope. He thought about Sonia. As he still did. As he always did, not with the raw devastation of early grief, but with the settled, permanent ache of a wound that had closed without healing, the kind that reminded you of itself in cold weather, and in certain qualities of light, and in the face of someone young, who didn't know yet what the world was capable of doing to them. He thought about what it meant to build something for 300 years, not the product, the building, the daily, decade by decade, century by century commitment to a single thesis in the face of an enemy that wanted to erase not just you, but the possibility of what you believed. Victor had thought the gap between his world and Lucian's was absolute, had staked everything on that belief and used it to justify centuries of atrocity. The man who had walked out of that building tonight had said Victor was wrong, just by existing, just by being alive. Lucian closed the book. He went to the window and watched the sky lighten over the lower city, the river catching the early light. The ordinary morning of a world that didn't know what was running beneath it. He thought, she's in Victor's house now. And Victor is sleeping? And when Victor wakes, the first thing he'll be told is that a hybrid exists. He thought about what Victor would do with that information. He thought about what needed to happen before Victor woke up. He turned from the window and began making preparations. Eviman, back in the mansion, the morning had a different quality. Logan felt it the moment they came through the door, a shift in the social atmosphere of the building. Subtle, but total. Most of the 14 were awake. The awareness of Michael's presence moved through the space like a current. Not panic. Not hostility. Something more careful. The attention of people who understood the significance of what had just walked through their door and were managing their response with the discipline of an organization that had survived by not acting on unprocessed reactions. Khan met them in the entry hall. His eyes went to Michael and held for 3 full seconds before he got control of it. 3 seconds was a long time for Khan. The vehicles, Selene said, repositioned and withdrawn clean. He kept his eyes on Michael. The facility is being stripped, clean within the hour. Then we got nothing of operational value. We got the notebooks, Selene said, and we got him. She didn't gesture at Michael when she said it. She let the sentence stand on its own. I need the library, she said. Clear it, you, me, Logan, and him. Khan pulled his eyes from Michael and looked at Selene. The look contained approximately 11 different concerns ranked by priority. Victor is sleeping, Selene said, and will continue sleeping until I have enough information to brief him appropriately. A pause, which means before anyone in this building considers waking him, they'll speak to me first. The weight of that landed in the room. Everyone present understood what it meant. Not that Selene was contesting Victor's authority. She was managing the sequence of information, which was a different thing and a necessary one. And everyone in the room knew it, even if nobody was comfortable saying so out loud. Khan nodded. He cleared the library himself. The four of them sat at the library table. Logan, Selene, Khan, Michael. The notebooks opened between them, the map still on the wall. Morning light coming through the high windows at an angle that made everything look older than it was. Michael sat with his hands flat on the table and told them what he knew. He was American. He'd come to Budapest on an exchange program, medical school. He'd encountered the war in the worst possible way. Wrong place, wrong time, a Lycan attack in a subway tunnel. And in the aftermath, his biology had done something that no one, including Lucian's people who found them afterward, had been fully prepared for. He'd been bitten by both. In the same incident, a Lycan and a vampire, and the genetic material of both had found in his particular biology hosts that didn't reject either, but integrated them. Lucian's people found me running a fever that should have killed me, Michael said. Lucian understood immediately what he was looking at. He kept his voice level. He'd had 3 years to practice keeping his voice level. 300 years of theoretical work on hybridization, and the answer arrived not from a laboratory, from an accident in a subway tunnel. He wasn't cruel, Michael continued. The qualification doing heavy work. He explained everything. He was honest about what I was and what the research needed. A pause. But honest and consensual aren't the same thing. I didn't choose that room. I didn't choose what they did there. He looked at the table. He needed samples and observation time, and he needed me to stay in place while all of that happened, and I stayed because I had no other option. For 3 years, Logan said. For 3 years. Selene had been reading the notebook since they'd sat down, working through the notation with the fluency of someone who'd encountered this research in fragments over decades and could now read the current form. Her face was doing the contained, precise work of someone processing significant information without letting it show. The hybridization is stable, she said, without looking up. He's documented the integration across all primary biological systems. It's not partial. She looked up. It's complete. What does that mean exactly? Logan said. It means Michael is not a Lycan who acquired vampire traits or a vampire who acquired Lycan traits. He is something that is genuinely both at the most fundamental biological level. The strengths of both are present. A pause. And the weaknesses are reduced. Silver slows me down, Michael said, with the flat affect of a man who'd been a dataset for 3 years. Strong UV gives me a headache. I can go out in daylight. I can handle silver without it killing me. The transformation, Khan said. Controlled? I can transform. I can also choose not to. Michael held Khan's gaze. I choose. Khan looked at Selene. The 11 concerns from the entry hall had been replaced by something more focused, and Logan thought more dangerous. The look of someone doing a strategic calculation and arriving at an answer with implications they hadn't fully mapped. He's not a weapon, Logan said. Everyone looked at him. Whatever calculation is running, Logan looked at Khan directly. He's not a weapon. He's a person who got caught between 2 sides of a war he didn't start, and he's been in a room for 3 years and he just walked out of it. The first thing he needs is to be treated like a person. Khan looked at Logan with the expression of someone who had been in operational leadership for centuries and was not accustomed to being told what the first priority was. Logan is correct, Selene said. No hesitation. That surprised Logan slightly. It clearly surprised Khan considerably. Michael, she said, you are not a prisoner here. You can leave this building at any time you choose. We'll provide whatever you need. A pause. I'd ask that you stay long enough to speak with me further about the research. But that's a request, not a condition. Michael looked at her. Running the same careful assessment he'd run in the facility room, checking whether the offer matched the room's actual atmosphere. He looked at Logan. Logan met it without performing anything. Just present. the body language of someone who'd said what he meant and wasn't supplementing it. Michael looked back at Selene. "All right," he said, "for now." Outside the library windows, the morning had fully established itself. The city was going about its ordinary life on the surface, unaware of the weight of centuries pressing upward through the stone beneath its feet. In the lower district, Lucian was making preparations for something Logan couldn't yet see, and in the east wing of the mansion, behind a door that hadn't opened in months, something shifted in the quality of its stillness. Logan didn't hear it, but something in the oldest part of him registered it anyway. The way pressure changes before a storm, long before the sky gives any sign of what's coming.